With every breath I take all of my days, I will glorify your name.
Parents, welcome to another episode of The Journey, a podcast intended to educate, equip, and entertain you as we talk about important issues facing our families. PCA is a Christ-centered, biblically based, and family-focused community of committed believers doing life together. We hope the information you hear on this podcast informs and inspires you to be a better parent. Welcome to The Journey.
Oh, there we go. All right, parents, welcome back to The Journey. We're trying something new. This is Dan Panetti, Director of Parent Engagement and Ministry. This is going to be, in a sense, kind of like a live podcast, a live parent podcast. We're recording it, and then we're going to release it. But we didn't know if we would know what the election returns were going to be. And so we wanted to do something live just to chat about it, just to talk about it. And so I wanted to put some different people on and get their perspectives on what we learned from the election, what we learned from the polls, from different people who got voted in, different statewide initiatives on a bunch of different things. And so Sharayah Colter and Ron Kelley, two wonderful people that we talk politics a lot in your world. Is around politics a lot. And so we're going to have some different people on here as guests, but I wanted to first thank you for taking out a few minutes of your day to come on here and share with our parents some of the perspectives of what you learned from the other evening and kind of what direction our country is moving in. So Sharayah, let's begin with you. What was kind of like your big takeaway from last night, the election results, and where you see our country headed?
Well, I think there's certainly some positives and there's some sobering elements. It looks to me like God has given us a gift of, it looks like we have some political cover, but we have a major amount of work to do in changing the culture. You can really see that in the pro-life ballot initiatives that happened. The majority of those passed, with states wanting to affirm abortion rights in their states. Only 3 really were pro-life. 4, I guess, if you count that Nebraska had a couple of different things going there with 1 for, 1 against. But just that illuminates the fact that a lot of America is still not ready to say we want to protect life. So as Christians, that shows us that the next several years, we have a lot of work to do in just education of helping people to know what that entails, why every life is a gift and precious from God, and why we must protect it. But now we have a big blessing that we have some time to work on that, where we're not, under the water hose.
Yeah, you know what, Sheree, I'm glad you started with the life issue, because when they polled people, apparently for young women, this was the number one issue that they went to vote on, was the issue of abortion. And really for young women on college campuses, it was the issue of they want to have the right to end a pregnancy whenever they want to, and they want to have that right protected by the state. Now, I'll say this, some people still don't understand how important the Dobbs decision was, because if we were still under Roe versus Wade, we wouldn't be talking about these. States wouldn't be wrestling with these things. We wouldn't be voting on this as a democracy, actually being able to give our opinion. So I think we have to be reminded that one of the great things that happened is we got a couple of Supreme Court justices on there that overturned 49 years of a really, really, really bad law. Roe versus Wade was bad law. Now, that means that, yes, we're going to have these statewide initiatives. And in several states, they put the right to have an abortion actually into their state constitution. And it's so unfortunate and it's so damaging in those particular states. But like the state of Florida, the voters there turned out and said, no, we are going to protect life. And so can I just tell you, in every state, this is a huge issue. It's so important. And I think from a Christian perspective, this needs to be a very, very important issue, that we go to the ballot box and say, hey, I'm voting for life and for government to protect the right for states to protect life, right? And so, Sheree, I'm glad you started with that, because that was one of my big takeaways as well. So, Ron, what about you? What was kind of one thing that you saw from the election the other night that you thought was important?
Yeah, I think the thing that really stood out to me is, say whatever you want about Donald Trump, but what we saw from the vote is that his support was a cross-section of America. Yeah, unlike any other Republican presidential candidate. And I mean, I think the number was 23 to 25% of Black urban men supported Trump. The Latino vote was off the charts. And just the cross section of support for Donald Trump, I think that was quite impressive, because I don't know about you, but I listened to all the experts and they were all over the place. I don't think anyone really knew how it was going to play out. And I'm pleasantly surprised how it turned out. And I think we have a wonderful opportunity to move forward. Now, the hard part, starts now, the work, because we have many problems in America. And as you know, the good news is it looks like, we have retained the Senate, but it looks like we are going to retain the House also. So we're going to have a unified government. There is no excuse to not take care and tackle some of the big issues that our country has been facing.
Yeah, I'm glad, because maybe the day of identity politics, of people, from racial backgrounds being slotted into, Republicans are just wealthy white people and Democrats are minorities. It's like, here's the deal. Human flourishing, right and wrong, an economy where people can actually afford to go to the grocery store. These are not issues that deal with racial things. These are every mom and dad want to put food on their table and want to have a safe environment for their kids. And so I was thrilled to see the numbers as they came out, and realize that people are no longer looking at just people who look like them and say, how are you voting? But they're actually looking at the issues and saying, what's best for our country and how do we move forward in that? So maybe the idea, the day of identity politics is behind us, and we can actually move forward to people saying, I'm going to vote right for the person and the policies that I think are most important for my family. Sharayah, I noticed something behind you. You've got the flag of Israel back there. That wasn't one of the things that a lot of people talked about as an important issue, but it really was an important issue in this particular election. How do you see that moving forward for our country?
Absolutely. It is critical that the American president stand in stark solidarity with Israel, our ally. Not only for political reasons, but from scriptural reasons. God has said that those who bless Israel, God will bless. And God has given very many promises to Israel. So we as Christians have to just line up with scripture there and say, who God is for, we are for. So we are for Israel. So I'm very pleased to know that we have very strong support from Donald Trump, the president-elect, to stand with Israel, to stand with their right to defend themselves, and for us to just be a great support for them.
Yeah, I noticed that I think it was New Mexico elected the first Iranian American congresswoman. And so it's very interesting when you have people from different backgrounds and from different cultures and different countries when they come to the United States, and they bring those ideas with them. And so that's one of the things to notice is people that we put into Congress. Their idea of what makes America great and representing America right to the rest of the world, we need to pay attention to who those people are, because there's a number of people in Congress who would definitely choose countries in the Middle East that are not pro-America, that are not pro-Israel, and they have been elected by their constituents, and so we need to pay attention to that and notice that. Ron, what about the economy? I just want to throw that out. Number one issue that most of the people went to the ballot box and voted on. From a Christian perspective, is that okay for us as Christians to be concerned about? And let's just put it in maybe the worst way possible, right? Hey, Ron, I'm voting for my pocketbook. Is that okay?
Absolutely. I mean, I think last night was a victory for common sense, because families are struggling to put food on the table.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've noticed the same thing. Our utility bills have skyrocketed.
Absolutely.
So absolutely, we have every right. I mean, God calls us to be faithful stewards, and it's much harder to be a faithful steward when the bills continue to go up here. So yeah, Christians, I mean, Jesus spoke a lot about money. And money and possessions. Money and possessions speaks to the condition of our heart in so many instances. But in this case, yeah, I mean, making ends meet and providing for our families is a huge issue, and I think we're going to find that if it's not number one, it's number two
Yeah.
concern of people going into the ballot box.
Yeah. Hey, if you guys don't mind, I want to add Audrey to our conversation. And the reason why, Audrey Loyola, thank you so much for popping in here. She just asked me before, she's like, "Is just this audio?" And I was like, "No, we've got to have you on video, right?" I mean, just a beautiful young PCA alumni who I saw last night. Ready for this? I saw last night because when Ted Cruz went up to take his victory speech, I looked to his right. And as a PCA employee, I was just so proud to see two PCA alumni standing there, right? Audrey and Diego. So super thrilled with you. Uncle Ted won the Senate race again here in Texas. So Audrey, let me just ask you, as a young woman, what do you see as the important takeaways from the election last night? Not only in Ted Cruz's victory, but just kind of looking at the nation as a whole.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me, Dan. We're so excited, thrilled to be here. It was an incredible night. What we saw last night was an overwhelming red wave. And it was just exhilarating to be in the room where it happened. And we are just so thrilled for Senator Ted Cruz and the president-elect, President Donald Trump, to be back in office. What we saw last night was so incredible because I truly believe that this election, we saw the church rise up. We saw people in my generation rise up. We saw people voting to protect our God-given rights, to defend life, to safeguard our freedom, to uphold the values that make us America, that make America that shining city on a hill that our founding fathers intended it to be. We regained the Senate like we were talking about. We are probably going to take the House. It's minutes until they call it. And like you guys were saying earlier, we saw the Hispanic vote skyrocket. This was a record election. And it's imperative to me as a young woman. I'm about to get married. I'm voting for my future family. And this was an imperative election to stand up for truth, to stand up for our freedom, and to stand up for our morals and our true values, because if no one does, who's going to,
Yeah, so important. And I think, when we talk about young people voting, it really is that voting block that really doesn't turn out. We spend so much time, energy, and effort and money trying to get young people to vote, and young people just don't turn out. But it's so interesting to think about, right? I mean, as I'm, in my older years, and I vote because I understand the importance of it, and I see this, and as Ron mentioned, right, I'm trying to put food on the table for a family. But young people, just that idea of, we're not just voting for a president for the next 4 years. You're really voting for an administration that could have 8 years, 12 years, 16 years of influence in, right, the White House and in Congress, and also, right, the Supreme Court. Right. We noticed that when we had some presidents in there that put people in, we had Roe versus Wade for 49 years, right, of really, really bad law. And so, Audrey, I love how you're framing that particular issue, that young people need to understand you're voting for the next 50 years of influence in the people that you put in. And those things are important. Religious liberties. I was just listening to somebody talk about how people in England are being arrested for praying outside of abortion clinics, right? And not for praying out loud, right? There's a person who just got arrested for praying silently, which you just got arrested for thoughts in your head, right? And we keep on thinking here in America, it's like, listen, we've got freedom of speech, we've got freedom of religion, we've got the First Amendment. It's like, yes, but we have to have people who understand how important those things are and enforce those, right? And make sure that we get good judges who say, yes, that's what it means, right? And so, Audrey, I'm so glad that you as a young person understand the importance of this and are voting not just about, what's important today, but what's important for the future going forward. Was there anything that jumped out to you about maybe Senator Cruz's race? I know it was the most expensive Senate race in history. Anything that jumped out to you, though, in that particular race that you thought was kind of an indicator of where we are as a country and where we're going?
I will tell you, yes, it's been the most expensive Senate race. It's been absolutely astronomical, the money that has been spent here. But it's the grassroots people that are fighting to keep Texas, to keep Texas red. And I'll tell you one thing I did notice that I thought was so incredible was that, we were really up against someone who was just paying for campaign ads. It was someone who was on the boots on the ground. Senator Cruz actually did a 53 stop Texas tour of Texas. He would go be on the ground with his constituents, with his people, the people that he's fighting for while he's in Washington, D.C. And unfortunately, his opponent was just paying for ads and hiding behind the TV screen. And I think that we've seen that a lot. Unfortunately, with my generation as well, everyone's hiding behind a screen, and we've lost that sense of being in community with each other. And I really believe that Senator Cruz really took that charge of saying, you know what, I want to step out. I want to be among the people, because I'm not here to make friends. I'm not here to just get reelected because I need a job. I'm here to fight for Texans. And that's exactly what he did.
Yeah, so important to actually be out where the people are. I think one of the interesting things we saw, and maybe nobody pays attention to where people live until you actually see those maps, and how important it is, this particular county and this particular county and the election returns coming in. But more than half of our country lives in urban areas now, urban and suburban areas, right? And so most people live in the cities. And I just think it's an important reminder for us, right? We live in a major city, in a major state, but just to be a reminder that, we're supposed to not just live our lives with, people who look like us and talk like us and think like us. We're supposed to be an influence in our community. And so, Audrey, what a great reminder that when, we've been given a gift, that we need to make sure that we share that with others. And we need to be an influence. Our homes need to be an influence in our communities. Our churches need to be an influence in our communities. And that's really such an important aspect for us. Sharayah and Ron, anything about Senator Cruz's race that you guys picked up on that was kind of interesting while Audrey's with us?
Sharayah, I'll let you go first, my friend.
I just really appreciated Senator Cruz, in the time in which it's popular to, shirk from your strong convictions. He didn't do that. And so I was very grateful that he stood strong for the things that Texans want him to stand strong on. And, with some national leaders who won't even go to the border, Senator Cruz is standing very firm to say, we've got to protect our state. We cannot allow, a continuous inflow into our country that's just illegal. Like, we have laws and we have to follow those laws, or we cease to become a respectable nation that can protect its own citizens. And so especially as a mom, I'm really grateful to have someone who will stand on that and not shirk away from it, because it's not an abstract thing. This is something that's affecting people's children and their brothers and their sisters and their parents. And we don't have to look very far to see the news stories that are tragic, to see people losing parts and members of their family because of these policies that have opened our country. And, Allie Beth Stuckey says, and everyone loves this line, and I do too, policies matter because people matter. And so I'm so grateful that he is standing for those policies, because these people do matter. And we don't want to continue bringing fentanyl into our country, bringing trafficking. These are things that have actual real world consequences. So I'm so grateful for him standing strong.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the border in terms of not just immigration, but fentanyl, right? Drugs, jobs. I mean, it's the whole concept of, having a secure border so that people are secure from things that can be harmful is such an important thing. And I know we do this in our homes, right? I don't leave my door open and my garage door open and just, let people walk into my home willy-nilly. But we do in our country. And I think, this has become not just a Texas issue, but a national issue, because Texas has really taken the issue and helped inform other states, right? I love that we're taking people and we're sending them to other states and saying, listen, if you want to come into America, welcome to, New York. And I just remember that, the New York, mayor is, freaking out because it's like, wait, what are all these people doing here? Why are you shipping us people? And it's like, listen, this is a country issue. This is a United States issue. We're not just building a wall right, to try to protect Texas or Arizona or California, right? This is a national issue. And so Senator Cruz, I know this is a huge issue that he has stood on, and that he has worked on. And obviously, I think, people in America said that this is an important issue for them as well. So Audrey, we know that you, are thinking about getting into politics as well one day, and it's a passion of yours for a number of years. Can I just ask you this? Huge difference between men and women. So, like the gender gap in terms of voting. It seems like the issue for young women, Sharayah mentioned this earlier, really is abortion and the right to have an abortion. How do you think we as the church really address that particular issue to help young women understand that there's more to this issue than just the right to have an abortion, that there's something bigger that's going on here? How do you think we can speak to young women to help in, because it seems like it's a political issue, but it's also a moral, social, and biblical issue. Do you think we're doing it the right way, addressing it?
Fantastic question. I think that we have seen abortion, especially in this election. We had a lot of single issue voters, and the issue of abortion was the most prominent, along with the border, but among women and among women my age, abortion was the top thing. And I'll tell you, it has been disheartening and very sad to see the skew in my generation looking at abortion. It's so sad that we have gone so far from biblical truth to protecting life, and not just protecting, we're protecting all lives. And we have to get back to that, because, the mainstream media wants to tell you that, getting an abortion is something to be proud of, and shout your abortion was something that the left was promoting. And you guys saw at the DNC, they had troves of trucks giving abortions right there on site. That is so sad to see, and we need to get back to where our founding fathers wanted us to be, our biblical truth of protecting life and upholding that freedom, that life starts at conception. A fetus is life, and that's something that it's a tall ask, unfortunately, that we're getting to, or we have to continue preaching that, and we have to continue spreading the word, because unfortunately the mainstream media and just the way that the world has gone has glamorized abortion in a way that is very sad.
Yeah, I think my take on this, it goes back to, I don't know if you guys remember Alyssa Milano as an actress. She had 2 abortions when she was young, and she really feels like her success in Hollywood was the thing that, she wanted to pursue, and not a family at that time. And so after she became successful, right, then she decided to have a family. And I think it's something interesting, and tell me if I'm completely crazy on this, but I think for the last 40 or 50 years, it's been okay in our culture for a man to sacrifice his family to be successful in the business world. And what I mean by that is when a man, right, has a family and he's spending time at work, and he's pursuing things at work, and he's not spending time with his family, nobody batted an eye. And I think women have finally entered the fray and just said, you know what, the same thing goes for us then. We can sacrifice our family to be successful as well. And I just think the picture really is that both men and women are choosing the wrong things. And I think from a man's standpoint, we need to be accountable for that. We need to say, you know what, you're right. If we're going to say that God, family, right, and then our job is the order of importance, then we actually need to live that out. And from a man's standpoint, we need to take a leadership. I noticed that, when they did the polling, that abortion was not a very high issue for men. And I'm like, that's sad, right? That for men, we are not the ones who are seeking to protect the life of the unborn, that we've bought into this idea that somehow this is a woman's issue and it's a woman's body. And it's just like, no, it's the woman's body is not the one that's being killed, it's the child, right? And so as men, we need to stand up and say, we need to speak this issue. But I think we also need to take ownership of the idea that for a lot of men over the years, that they have sacrificed their family to get ahead, and now women are simply following the same leadership that has unfortunately been put out in front of them, and they're sacrificing their family to get ahead, as well. And so I think just from a church standpoint, we need to come back and we need to remind young men that, our job is to follow God first, and to be thrilled with having a family. And yes, it's going to come at a cost to you, and maybe you're not going to be the CEO by 30, but you know what? That's okay, because sacrificing your job for your family is better than sacrificing your family for your job. So, any thoughts on that? Am I way out on left field on that?
No, not at all. Hey, Dan, we interview a lot of candidates, and even
Yes.
those candidates that are pro-life, they proclaim to be pro-life, but when you start asking them about exceptions, then you really find out what they truly believe, because so many of the candidates we've spoken to, they've missed the whole point that God is sovereign. He's the creator of all life. He's created all life, even in horrific events that occur. And so if a life is produced from that horrific event, we've told, women that it's okay, or we've told men also it's okay to do something far worse, ending that life.
Yeah.
And what makes me so sad is, think of the lost potential of the 60 plus million babies that didn't get a chance to fulfill, their God ordained potential. And, could have been the first female president and a part of that 60 plus million. And I think that's what's so sad. And I would just make one last comment. Our pregnancy center, the Prestonwood Pregnancy Center, I think they do a tremendous job, in the Family Resource Center, where we care about families. And we approach this subject from a matter of love. And we embrace them, but we share truth with them. This is not a mass of cells. This is a human life that God created, and it's a miracle, and it's a beautiful thing. So,
yep. So important. We want to add one more person, Scotty Turner, right? Scott Turner's coming on. If any of you need to hop off, because I didn't tell you how long you needed to hang on, right? If you need to hop off, please feel free to do that. But I want to add Scott in here, because Scott, you've been a part of this administration in the past, and obviously with President Trump coming in, there might be opportunities for you as well. But I just wanted to ask you, what did you see last night as you were looking at the election returns? And looking at why people are voting the way that they're voting? What did it tell you about America and the direction that we're heading in?
Well, thank you, Dan, and good morning to everyone. Very simply, the American people spoke. The media always does a great job of acting as if they are the ones that speak for people. But the American people are tired and weary. I know in the different states that I was going to and speaking on behalf of the campaign, and, traveling around and just talking to people in general, wherever I am, Democrat or Republican, people are tired, and they saw the opportunity to vote for a man in President Trump who believes in, the prosperity of American families. And when I say prosperity, I mean that if you work hard, you go to work, you can take care of your family, not having to worry if you can pay for your light bill, or not having to worry if you have to choose between, going to the grocery store or choosing medicine. It used to be that was a subject for senior citizens, but that became the mantra. That really became the theme for just everyday American families. And so last night, people spoke up. And, it's interesting because when you look at the months ensuing the election night last night, or before the election last night, the media did a great job of saying, yes, look at the American people. They're buying into the policies of the left. They're buying into the rhetoric, of Kamala Harris. And really, those weren't policies. They were statements that didn't even really make sense. But then when Trump and his campaign came out and said, this is what we believe, this is why we believe it, and this is what we're going to do about it, the American people caught hold of that. And I was talking to my wife, Robin, I said, it's so amazing how politicians and the media think that the American people are dumb. Some people are misinformed, some people are ill-informed and not informed at all, but American people are not stupid. And so last night they let their voice be heard at the ballot box and say, you know what, I'm tired of it. I may not like the person that I vote for. I may not, but the policies and the principles that they stand for, I'm for it. And so that's why you see the numbers.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned the media, because I did think it was interesting. A number of the people last night talking about the vote and the influence talked about the bro vote, right? Young men going to the ballot box and voting, and they were very interested in realizing that young men are not watching, ABC News, and young men are not watching Fox News. Young men are listening to Joe Rogan and listening to podcast, and Joe Rogan had on President Trump, right, and JD Vance, and for 3 hours, right, and I know countless young men that have consumed that. I think it's very interesting, right? I mean, I don't know if Joe Rogan is the voice that we need out there speaking to young men, telling young men what it means to be.
Right.
But at least he's out there, asking questions, and people are getting on there, and he's using that particular platform. But what do you think about just young men kind of returning back to the ballot box and voting for policies and procedures and politicians and individuals that in a sense it's are upholding men are men and women are women. The idea that instead of gender confusion, right? That I think you're right, Scott. That a lot of young men are very frustrated with transgender ideology of women competing in men's sports, and there isn't a lot of media outlets that are actually addressing these things and talking about these things, right? But there's a lot of other outlets that are. And those outlets are really having an influence on our policies and our procedures today. So, Scott, what do you think about that? Just young men showing up and voting in the way that they did.
No, I'm excited about it, because the whole demasculinity movement, over the last few years, and it was starting to infiltrate, culture and infiltrate the ideology and the minds of young men. You saw it in movies. You saw it in how young men dressed. You saw it in how young men carried themselves. You saw it in how young men were getting married, being faithful to their spouse. I mean, so it was taking hold. And so to see these guys come say, you know what, I am a man, and this is what it means to be a man. And then they voted for it. When I say voted for a man, I'm not talking about just in gender, but they voted for a man's man, somebody who stood up, for strong men and strong country and strong women and strong families. And so to see that generation of men return to the ballot box is very encouraging. And I think now that as they return to the ballot box and they now get them to return to a life in Christ and a life in faith, return to their families and take care of their families. So I think this is a great beginning. There's much work to be done, but I'm very encouraged by it, because once the heart of the country will change.
Yeah.
Once the heart of the men of this country changes, and particularly changes with Christ formation, then the very soul of this country will change. And so I'm excited about that.
Awesome. Audrey, let me ask you, I know you've got to go. You've got a lot of important things to do. Thanks for popping on with us. What was it like? This is just kind of a personal question. What was it like to be in the room with the victory and the atmosphere and all the different things that were happening? Because you guys spent a lot of time, energy, and effort. And I know sometimes, we forget that politics is a lot of knocking on doors and putting up yard signs, and sometimes we forget how important that is, right? They always say, a yard sign's not going to win an election, right? But
Sure.
those yard signs and those door hangers and those faithful people who are just going out and talking to their neighbors and knocking on doors, and as you said, Senator Cruz spent time with the grassroots, right? What was it like to be in that room and to really kind of celebrate the victory that you saw that came from, just the average, mom and dad, husband and wife, just, getting out and letting their neighbors know who they're going to vote for?
I have to say it was exhilarating. It was thrilling. And there's something about being in a room with hundreds of like-minded people that just really gets you going. I mean, it was incredible. The energy in the room was just electric. And you know, it takes a village, like you're saying, to run for office. It's not just one person. It's not just a family. It's thousands and thousands of people. It's volunteers. It's interns. We had interns that would, you know, come straight from class to just pass out, you know, pamphlets to people, and people who really believe in a cause. It's a burning, fiery passion for our country. And being in that room last night was just incredible. Looking out at the crowd of all these people who have fought hard for this win. You know, we stood strong on keeping Texas, Texas, and keeping Texas red, and we did just that. And just a victory for not just Senator Cruz, not just us as his family, but it was a victory for Texas, and it was a victory for all of the people that came out to help us win.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a great reminder, because when we talk about politics and just, you know, the right to vote and exercising your right to vote, there's so much more that you can actually do. You know, so many different ways that you can be involved, even supporting candidates. We mentioned, you know, that Senator Cruz's race was the most expensive race. Can I just tell you, right? It's not about, you know, some guy giving $1 million or $2 million. It's about millions of people giving $5 and $10 and $20, right? And understanding that your money is a ballot as well, and you get to vote with that. And your yard is a ballot, and you get to vote by putting your yard sign out and talking to your neighbors and things like that. And so I think if we do it in a way that's winsome, persuasive, and constructive, you know, we can have an influence. And so I want people to be well spoken on issues, and I want them to share about, you know, who they voted for and why, and what these issues are and why they're important. And so being informed is such an important part. I know, right, for this particular parent podcast, we spent, you know, 2 weeks with, you know, Scott Turner talking about politics. We spent 2 weeks with the Colters talking about politics and policies and procedures and all the different things. And so, you know, to then finally have the election and to get people to go out and to vote those particular values is such a rewarding experience to see that people, you know, have done that. But it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of money. And so, Audrey, thank you for, you know, putting in that investment as a young woman, you know, saying that this is important, because there's a lot of other people your age that are, you know, all about their career and all about getting ahead. But you know, you're all about making Texas better and our country better. So I appreciate that about you.
Dan, can I just piggyback on what Audrey was saying there for a second? I think that enthusiasm element is really so important, and it really extends far even beyond politics. We had a great prayer meeting at Prestonwood this week, and it was just really encouraging, I think, to be in the room with, like you're saying, like-minded people that we stand on the same foundations and principles. We share that in common. And I think if any of us learn something from COVID, it's that it really does matter to be in the room in person with people. And that when we're with other people who are, you know, pushing us forward and upward to better, and we can, you know, help each other by that camaraderie is so important, that we can see this not just in politics, but I'm praying we see this in the wave of a great awakening. You know, if we are people who are so convictional about our faith, who are, you know, glued into our Bibles. You know, our pastor just released a brand new book about how important it is to be reading your Bible, be a person of the word. You know, we can have that positive peer pressure, and is so important. And it can, as it has effects in the policy and politics realm, it can have an effect in our churches. And as you know, the Danbury Institute, we're working so much with churches, and we see a lot of apathy, unfortunately. But this is just a reminder for us to say, church, come alive, stand up, be bold, read your Bibles, stand on what God has said, and then tell your friends, and come along and, you know, do that in community. And when we do, I think that we will begin to see just the ripple effect so clearly. And I think it will be encouraging. And then it's just from that moment, it's an exponential increase, just the same way that, you know, we feed off each other. I want to see that enthusiasm, not just in politics, but in our churches.
Yeah. So Sharayah took us to that next level. Let's just take a minute. Next steps, right? Scott, what's the next thing that people need to do? The election is passed, right? What would you tell them to do now?
So I would say, one, obviously continue to pray for our country, pray for our leaders, all of the leaders. I mean, we still have a country to run. And the administration that's in power now, they're in power. And we need to pray for them at every level. We need to pray for a peaceful transfer of power, so that we come across to the rest of the world that we mean business and that we're unified here. And then I would pray, in preparation for the next administration. We've put a lot of work in already at the last 3.5 years to get prepared for this day, but really for Inauguration Day and beyond. And so I think prayer is the right thing. And then two, I would encourage everybody to get our house in order. I believe God has stayed his hand and that he's given us an opportunity to come back and to get right with him as individuals and as a nation. And I really do believe it's that opportunity. And so pray continually, get our house in order, our internal house, our external house, and our family. And then the last thing I would say is to walk humbly before the Lord and be open to how he wants to use each of us in the days ahead.
Yeah. Scott, that was a word to Audrey as she's about to get married. Get your house in order, Audrey. Audrey, what would you say, just as a word of moving forward, right? The election's now, yesterday. What would the advice be moving forward to today and tomorrow?
Yeah, no, I would say to keep the momentum going. We've won the race, but let's continue running. Let's continue running. Let's continue to, like Scott was saying, build up the church. The church is on the precipice of something so great. We've stepped into something so great. And let's continue to further the Lord throughout the world. We were talking earlier about the Great Commission. It's not just here. It's not just in our homes, but it's across the world. And we are that shining city on a hill as America. And it's only going to get better from here. We've been placed in a place of authority, and let's not take that for granted. Let's continue the fight moving forward.
I love that word. That's good. Sharayah, any last words from you?
No, I just echo what they say, grab onto that momentum, not let up. The work is only just beginning. If we thought we were busy in the last year, well, get ready, because it is now time to put the pedal to the metal. And we cannot stand to waste any minutes. We have to take this gift that God has given us, that really is a grace gift, and not squander it, and to do the very best we can to be good stewards.
Amen. Well, guys, I appreciate you, not just for popping on here and talking to our parents about what you saw, what you thought, your perspectives, but I appreciate the work that you guys have done and will continue to do. And we will just pray for God to continue to make your ministries, just fruitful, multiply the opportunities that are given to you, because each of you, including Ron Kelley, who had to hop off for a meeting, you guys are such an instrumental and influential aspect of really, the body of Christ. Serving, giving, ministering, standing up for what is true and right and good. And I'm so I'm thrilled not only to know you, but I'm thrilled with the positions that the Lord has blessed each of you with, and your connection to our school. So we're just going to continue to pray for each of you, and pray for, as Scott said, the administration that's currently there, the one that's coming in, for that for that transfer of power, and then for the work to be done for that new administration as they come in and hopefully move our country in the direction that they said they were going to move us in. So we just appreciate you guys, appreciate all that the work that you've put in, and appreciate the time that you spent with us here today and sharing with our parents. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you for investing the time to listen to this episode of The Journey. Please take a minute to share with friends and family who will also benefit from this valuable resource. And don't forget to rate and review this podcast on your favorite podcast app. It is truly our blessing and honor to walk with you on The Journey.